I'm always tempted to say good morning. I know we're way past that, but welcome everyone. If you're here, it's Monday night at 7 p.m. We are the CARES program, so we are caregivers and relatives empowered for support. If this is your first time joining us, just know that we do this weekly series. It kicks off at 6:30 with the community that gathers here, and then at 7 o'clock, we have an hour dedicated to an expert speaker. And the expert speakers are people who have lived experience, professional experience around the field of recovery. We know that there's many groups out there that you can go out there to find help for yourself in recovery. But what makes this program distinct is it's a program that's being developed as we speak to really help family members. These are the mothers, these are the fathers, these are siblings, these are children who are going out and saying, we know where to take our family members, or there's many recommendations, but what about a community for us? And that's the hope in what we're developing here. So I'm a university professor. I work in the School of Social Work. I'm also a son of someone who is recovered. My father from alcohol now about 30 years or so. So this is near and dear to me, both professionally and personally. But again, if you're here for a very special experience. The way it'll go is we have our expert speaker today, Julie McElrath, who is the president and chief officer over at Clean, you'll have to help me. I can't even read my own writing. Clean Cause Foundation. That's my first error in my entire life, if you can believe it. No, that's not true. There it is. So Clean Cause Foundation. And Julie has been an incredible friend to our program and has really helped pour in a lot into this. So we're very excited. We'll have time to share, and then afterwards also bridge into questions. So, and before we get started, we're going to go ahead and pop up a QR code, because something different for this week is we want to gather information from everyone here, both those who are online joining us and those who are here. So if you have your phone, feel free to snap a picture. There's a QR code, there's a link, and just 3 simple questions, which is, how would you define guilt? How would you define shame? And how would you define self-compassion? And you'll find that on the link there. It's really helpful for us because we really want to know, what are the stories that you have? How are things defined for you? And as we hear from Julie today, we want to learn how best we can help out in the community. So remember, we're building this as we go along, but we all have a huge heart for that. So that's all I have for right now. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to Julie.
Thank you, Renee. I am so grateful to be here. I had the pleasure of getting to know Russ Norwood because of some work that we do together. And as a result of that, we shared some personal experiences, and he invited me to help support the Cornerstone Cares program. And I'm just thrilled to do it. By way of that, I have gotten connected to other like-minded individuals, and so I'm looking forward to the time together tonight. What I will speak on tonight is moving from shame to compassion, and it is the invitation to change in families affected by addiction. Now, I will share with you that I do not personally have a substance use disorder. I have 2 adult children in long-term recovery. My daughter from alcoholism, and my son from polysubstance use disorder. And they both entered their journey into recovery when one was 24 and one was 27. And I really believe that the reason that my daughter went into recovery and her journey became, as soon as she did, was because my son went into recovery first. And she had the opportunity to see, first of all, how it positively impacted his life, and our family began to change as a result of his recovery. And so as she began to see the positive impact of that on our family system, she was sooner to identify that she needed support as well. And so part of what I'll speak to tonight is the importance of understanding that this is a family disease. I want to begin by giving a brief introduction of the curriculum that, as this program begins to iterate what will happen is small groups will begin to form, and you will walk through a process together of a curriculum called the Invitation to Change. And it's a compassionate, science-based approach that is designed to help families and loved ones support individuals struggling with substance use. This type of program synthesizes really and pulls together behavioral science, motivational strategies, and self-compassion. And through that process, it empowers families to respond without blame, without guilt, and without coercion. It is not the, something changed in the sound. Thank you. It is unlike the traditional tough love or confrontational methods that we may have all heard of in the past. It emphasizes understanding, connection, and change, and it fosters openness, non-judgment, and collaborative problem solving. So by shifting from shame to self-compassion, families are more able to heal together. And this creates a supportive environment that encourages positive change. And I spoke a little bit about that in a conversation I had before starting the presentation. I want to set the stage. Addiction, like I said earlier, is often framed as an individual struggle, yet it deeply impacts the entire family system. 3 things I want to sort of get across to the group tonight, and one of those is to understand how shame and stigma impact both everybody in the family system. I'll be speaking from the viewpoint of parents and children, and when I give examples, I'll give examples of me as a parent in our family system and my children as the family member that was struggling at the time. We'll discuss and think about how isolation and blame is experienced by families. And we'll talk and I hope discover how self-compassion and awareness fosters healing for the whole family. The weight of shame and stigma, it is heavy. It is heavy. I know it. I want to start off with understanding or thinking about the difference between guilt and shame. I think that often we may spool those up together and think of them as maybe the same thing, and they're really different. Guilt is about behavior. It arises when you believe you've done something wrong. It's usually tied to a specific action, and it can motivate a person to make amends or change their behavior. An example of this is something like, gosh, I feel really guilty because I lied to my friend. That's guilt. Shame is about our identity. It makes us feel that we're inherently flawed or unworthy. Instead of focusing on an action, shame makes a person feel that something is wrong with them as a person. An example of shame is, I'm a liar and a bad person. Those are 2 very different things. Guilt can be constructive, leading to positive change, whereas shame often leads to feelings of worthlessness and withdrawal. Let's talk a little bit about stigma, because I'll get into that when we connect shame and stigma. Stigma is a mark of disgrace, disapproval, or social judgment associated with a particular characteristic, behavior, condition, or group. It often leads to discrimination, exclusion, or negative stereotypes. Here's an example. There can be a stigma around mental illness and substance use disorders, where individuals with these conditions face prejudice or are unfairly judged. I can tell you that we experienced stigma in our family when our family was walking through our recovery and really prior to recovery and even early on in recovery, we experienced stigma. When shame and stigma combine, they create a powerful force of self-consciousness, exclusion, and social rejection. This often happens when we internalize the societal judgment, and it leads to deep feelings, again, of that unworthiness and isolation. I know that when it became really clear that my son was struggling with his substance use disorder, I ran away from reaching out. I turned inward. I felt a lot of shame. I did feel guilt. I felt more shame. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I was worried what people would think about us and our family. And I didn't reach out. I didn't know where to go. And so that shame, when I was preparing for this, I thought, that combination of the shame and the stigma really paralyzed me for a bit. For a long time, actually, because we dealt with it for a few years before my son reached the place where the illness got so significant that we moved into some action around his recovery. As we think about how to untangle the reinforcements of the cycles of silence and suffering and social exclusion, we want to look at and try to understand more shame and stigma. As a parent, I oftentimes felt like I had failed my child, and that my child's addiction was a reflection of both their inadequacy and mine, and really more mine. When I think about where my child was, I think that he might have been at the place where he was feeling guilty for causing so much pain to our family. And then he began to feel, isolate from us more because of the shame he felt and the guilt he felt of what was happening in our family. And he began to believe he was unworthy of love or help. And again, that cycle just took him further and further away from us. It was this ever-present elephant in the room, if you will. And then, I gave an example earlier, the community and societal stigma. And our family was not immune to this. Families experience judgment and blame from others. Again, just elevating the feeling that you need to, isolate and be silent. I wonder what the Booster Club parents are saying right now. I wonder what I wonder what our faith community is saying right now. I bet they're blaming me. I'm a single mom. I'm failing at this. And again, turning inward, turning silent, moving away from the things that we would normally go to, and making our world smaller and smaller. Speaking on that note, that shame for a family leads to secrecy, like I said earlier, avoiding seeking help, increases stress and disconnection within the family, which it absolutely did in our case. My son felt so shameful and guilty that he wanted to stay away more than he wanted to come home. I felt so scared. I was scared to ask any questions. I thought if I asked him anything, it would push him further away. And so we had always been close, and what began to happen was this chasm was just getting wider and wider and wider. All of this fuels the cycles of negative self-perception and hopelessness. Bless you. How do we break that cycle? Shame creates disconnection. Compassion builds connection. Recognizing addiction as a complex and treatable condition rather than a moral failing. It is not a moral failing. I have worked with a lot of individuals, not just in my own family, but in the last decade when I've been in this field, from teenagers to adults, and none of them that I know would choose to be where they were when I was working with them. They were hurting. They would not choose to be living on the streets, to have been disconnected from their family. That's just, they would not have chosen that. It is a neurological disease where the pleasure pathway has been disrupted, and there is hope. And when I worked with young people when I ran the Recovery High School, we really focused with our families on looking forward to the beauty in recovery, because it is nothing short of miraculous. And there is hope. And there is loss as well. What is self-compassion? And I love this. And I still have to remind myself how to practice self-compassion. It's still a work in progress for me, I'll tell you. One of the tools I use for myself is, I ask myself, now, Julie, how would you treat yourself if you were talking to a friend that was feeling, the way you're feeling about this? Treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer to a friend. Basically, be your own friend. Be your own friend. Acknowledge pain without self-judgment. You can say, this really hurts, and it doesn't make me a bad person. I'm doing the best I can with what I have right now, with the knowledge I have, with the tools I have. I'm doing the best I know how to do right now and today. Understand that struggles are part of the shared human experience. Anybody know a perfect family system? I don't. It's not possible. Not possible. And when I began to be able to take that in, it was really freeing. It's like there is not a family out there that doesn't struggle with something. I still have to remind myself of that too, because we can get caught up in that human condition of, what we're seeing on the mask we all wear, right? It's never perfect. It's perfectly imperfect. Have anybody heard that? It's perfectly imperfect. I believe we're designed that way because there's the spiritual piece of me says, I'll never know it all, and that just is what that is. I'm working to get through this. I'm watching my time. How do we apply self-compassion in the family system? As a parent, I can accept that the substance use disorder that my child has, the addiction, is not a failure of my parenting. If in our case, the family member, and in my case, the child or children that were suffering when they were, learning that their struggle does not define their self-worth. It does not define their self-worth. And for families overall, it's shifting from blame, and I love this, to curiosity and understanding. It's about staying curious. And so how does this awareness play a role in the healing process for a family? We want to start with recognizing the harmful narratives around addiction, and there are many out there. We want to shift the language from blame, why are you doing this, to understanding, what need does this fulfill for you? When I began to be able to shift out of my fear mode, which was my fear where I was like, why are you doing this? I was so scared, I didn't know what else to say. Like, what is going on? Why are you doing this? To, where's the pain? What's underneath all that? What need is this fulfilling for you? I was better able to be there for my children. Because quite honestly, I don't know if they knew initially what was missing and what that black hole was. And then moving, and I love this too. There's so many things in the work that we do in this process that are just so, it's like a tool chest, and they're so applicable in daily living. Moving from reaction to response. Learning our own emotional regulation. And I'll be very honest. I tend to be honest and authentic. I struggled with emotion regulation, and I'll tell you why. I grew up in a family system that I am very grateful for and I love. My parents are still alive today. We celebrated their 86th and 87th birthdays yesterday, and I feel very grateful. And my dad is the child of an alcoholic. His mother died at age 40, 2 weeks before my parents got married, from her untreated alcoholism. And at the time, the awareness around the disease of addiction, at that time, there was not a lot of awareness around it. And so in many ways, my dad I grew up in this home that was ACOA, untreated. And with that came the inability to regulate emotion in that family system. And so when I carried that into my own little new family of origin, not my family of origin, my kids' families of origin, it took really going through this process of recovery in our family system for me to better learn how to regulate my emotions. And I will tell you, that is another thing that has been such a gift. And it's a tool for my toolbox. So now I want to visit with you all a little bit about how the family system can heal together. I said it, I think this will be the third time now. The disease of addiction is a family disease. And the healing involves the entire system, not just the individual using the substances. I saw it in my own family. I also saw it in the families I worked with at the Recovery High School. When we had young people come into our programming, the teens that began to heal more quickly were the teens that were in families, that the families got engaged, that the parents really engaged in that process. And it is, I believe, it is our role in that family system as parents. We are the adults. And it doesn't matter if you've got a 2-year-old or a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old. I'm going all the way up to true adolescence, a 24-year-old. They are still looking back at us to see how they're looking more at what we're doing than what we're saying. And so when we began to change our actions and our operating premise within that family system, they take note of that. When that begins to happen, you're able to rebuild trust. You're able to open those lines of communication, and the whole family system becomes much more resilient. I can't tell you how many times I worked with families, again, going back to my time at the Recovery High School, where one of our students might have what I'd call a slip or a return to use. And it could be, I went to a party and we really, our whole culture was around open communication. This is not about getting in trouble. This is not about being blamed. This is not about you did something bad. A thing happened. Let's talk about it and figure out what we want to do about it next. So I worked with the kids that way, and we worked with the families that way. Because as the parents, and I got this from the parents' perspective, a slip happened, we go back into fear mode. Because, oh my gosh, what's next? This happened, so something else has got to be going to happen, and we're going to go downhill. And it does not have to be that way. And we began to, I would coach the parents around how to stay emotionally regulated, how to stay curious, how to respond, not react. And I worked with the kids kind of on those same things, and then would work with them together. And it was watching families heal, literally, that being knit back together was, where's Tom? A gift, a blessing. This is really a big tool for the toolbox, and it speaks to the isolation and the, making your world really small. Build a supportive community. Seek peer support, therapy, recovery groups for families. Reduce your isolation by talking openly about addiction. I began to find it so freeing to not feel like I had to hide something. There's a bit of a slogan in the 12-step community of secrets keep us sick. And I believe that is just a true statement. And then advocate. Change the conversation in the communities you're in by reducing stigma. Talk about it more. Normalize it. Normalize it as what it is rather than a moral failing. Oh my gosh, I'm ending up so close on time. This is amazing. It doesn't happen very often, just saying. Wow. So just a few.
We have more time. You keep going.
Well,
please.
Just a few key takeaways to kind of think about. Shame isolates. Self-compassion heals. Families are not to blame, and they do not have to heal alone. Healing is possible when we embrace compassion and awareness. And invitation to change offers practical tools for shifting from judgment to support. Gosh, it always passes so fast. That's it. That's it, folks.
Yeah. Julie, first off, I think I speak for everyone in the room and those online, just gratitude to you for being so generous in sharing such a personal story, for sharing your gift, for sharing your life, because I don't think there's a single person in this room or online that wasn't touched by what you shared. And I gotta say, I say this every week, this is the fourth expert that has sat at this table to share, and I feel very privileged to have the best seat in the house to be right here, and I feel like everyone here is in this spot because you hold our attention. I have a couple of questions, but honestly, I could sit here for another 5 hours and listen to you continue to share, Julie. And I think of something that you said when you talked about shame and stigma of not knowing what to do. Sometimes, families get caught in a moment where I don't know what to say. I feel like anything I will say may cause more harm. And then once the recovery path starts, some families will say, now I feel shame that I should have known better or I should have done this sooner. And so when families get caught in that cycle, what do you say to them when they're battling all those different emotions?
Well, I think I want to make sure I understand your question. Prior to beginning the recovery journey, families can feel like, I don't know what to say. And is that to the person in their family that's struggling? Okay. So let me answer that, and then I may get you to remind me about what the second part is. So it is a very hard place to be when someone that you love more than life itself is struggling and you're not sure what to do. And when I think I want to give an example of how to help based on my work at the school, because like I did the best I could, and I worked with the tools I had when I was going through it with my own family, and it was prior to having this now working knowledge and an education that supports my knowledge base. And it wasn't until my son an experience was had by him that brought him, back home, and he was willing to come back home and go through treatment. I will say this. Let me back up. There was a time when my son was not doing well, and he told me he was going to go to Colorado and grow miracle grade marijuana and raise some money, and then he would come back and finish school. And there was this thing in the back of my head where I knew that that really wasn't that wasn't the best plan. It just wasn't the best plan. I knew it. I knew he was struggling, and I did set a healthy boundary with him at that time. His dad and I, and even though we weren't married, we co-parented very successfully together and made sure we aligned on things when we, when we were working with our kids. And we told him that it is his choice to go. With that choice, that all expenses were on him with the exception of his cell phone, and we did that so we could keep in communication with him. Maybe now I wouldn't do that. Yet at that time, that was the decision we made with the tools we had. And he decided it still felt like a good idea for him. And we were at the place where we knew that he was at an age where we couldn't, if he felt like he could do it financially, we couldn't hold anything over his head anymore. I will never forget the day that he loaded up his belongings and his dog and his old Tahoe and drove out of my driveway. And I waved goodbye. And I'm likely to cry now because I cried then and I cry every time I tell this part of my story. I really didn't think I'd see him again. I didn't think that was a goodbye, I'll see you soon in 3 months, or, I thought it was I likely might not see him anymore. And yet, at the same time, I felt like if I fought him and got into a battle of wills with him, it would disrupt any sort of chance we had of maintaining some type of communication. And so he did that for about a year and a half. And his dad and I both stayed in communication, and he'd come home from time to time, and we both knew he wasn't healthy. And we worried a lot about him. And we left that door open. We were just doing what we could do to leave the door of communication open with him. And I do think that served us well, because we got a call from him, and he was really, really sick. And he came home. And got into treatment, and for him, his experience in that experience was, it has stuck with him to today, and I want to be real clear about that. I had to do something in that treatment experience with him where, after 2 weeks, he wanted to go home. He thought he could go home instead of going from the detox unit into the rest of his treatment experience. And I had the therapist that was there say, Julie, you're going to have to set a real loving boundary with him. He had drug-induced psychosis, and he said, you're going to have to share with him that you're not able to take care. Like, if he comes home now, you're not equipped to take care of him. And you're going to need to tell him that. I said, okay. Because I wasn't sure if he would listen to me or if he would say, I'm out and discharge. And then, again, I felt like I may never see him. His therapist drove in on a Sunday to help with this intervention. And I will never forget the look on my son's face. And I believe it was truly by the grace of God that I was able to get through this and say, I love you. I love you so much, and I'm not willing to sabotage your health and wellness. I don't have the tools. If you choose to leave now, you can't come home. And because our relationship, I have a codependent T-shirt I wear, or maybe I should say recovering codependent now. It wasn't at the time. I'd not responded that way before, so that was a shift in our dance as a parent and a child, right? And he looked at me as if he couldn't believe it. He could not believe I would say that to him. And he chose to stay. He chose to stay. And so I think that experience, I share that with you because that informed the ways I was able to show up at the Recovery High School that were with parents that were up against similar experiences with their children. And you can replace parent and child with husband and wife, with friend and friend, with, it's just the two people engaged in that relationship and in those conversations. You got a long answer.
No, this is good. This is good. When you're sharing that, one of the hardest things that we hear from a lot of families, and by the way, this is not going to be Renee asking questions all night. I want to make sure that if there's questions out here, give a space for questions. So please raise your hand. We want to make sure that we prep that. And for those online, if you have questions, submit them, and we want to make sure that we get that asked here. But one of the biggest fear that it comes for any family member is doing something different.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I did something real different that day.
So when you're in that moment,
yeah.
It's different because you talked about family dynamics and it's a system. And so everyone is used to this dance. You use the word dance as well. What happens when, as a parent or as a loved one, you're saying, I love you and I'm not going to engage in this right here, but I'm here when you're ready to come back. But on the other side, the person might be hearing, you don't love me because you're not helping me, and what that makes you feel. So how do you talk to parents, family members who might be coming in and bringing their kiddos and saying, I feel like my kid's looking at me like I don't care about them if I have to take this boundary or this stance here?
Yeah, when we worked with families at the school, and that did come up sometimes, of course, we were also working with the student to say, and they do care for you. And their primary responsibility is your parent to keep you safe and alive. And you may not like this and you may not understand it right now. And most of what the struggle was was this dynamic that had been built, if you will, through blame and shame and guilt, and everybody had their walls up. Again, when the young person sees the parent, or when one person sees the other person change the dance, it disrupts things enough that it's not the what they're expecting. And even if it is the tone of voice, the body posture, again, staying curious and asking them a question. And so I would help work with families around, and we would practice responses. And so we might even role play with kids and families, what do you anticipate they'll say? I mean, I did this a lot with kids. Oh, I know my dad's going to yell at me, or my mom's going to yell at me. They're going to take my phone. They're going to do all these things. This is what's going to happen, And I would say, okay, what if they didn't? Well, they are. I said, are you sure? Because I've been talking to them, And I don't think that's what they're going to do. Oh. I said, what if we give it a whirl? Like, what if we try it? And so, I think even without like a social worker or trained, a trained professional in there kind of helping, if even our examples would then, when they would be at home, they would practice. They had opportunities to practice. So it really is just changing the approach. It goes back to this staying curious, responding, not reacting. A posture that's open. I love you, and this may be a hard conversation for us to have, and you may not like where I end with it, and it's because I care about you. And I'm scared.
And Julie, if I can point out, you talked about community and how important that is, and you represented a community that came in, worked with the family, began to provide new tools. You introduced a new dynamic, a new way of communicating that neither the child nor the parent had ever had before. Right. Kiddos expecting that parents are going to be mad.
Yeah.
Parents are expecting kiddos not going to listen to me.
Exactly.
You're there, you're introducing very new language to them.
Yes.
And then this change begins to happen. And so I don't want to take a lot of space here, but if there is a question out there, please feel free to raise your hand. But the evidence model that you have there is invitation to change.
Exactly.
So you're not forcing anything on anyone.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
It is an invitation to change.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
First question.
I'm curious if anybody answered our questions. Because I always stay really curious about shame and guilt and self-compassion.
We did. We had some wonderful insights about shame. I'm just going to share some of the words. There's some of the comments shared of how would you define shame? Some perspectives were hating oneself and the feeling of worthlessness, feeling terribly embarrassed by my actions, something we regret and are sorry that we did, isolation and concern that I am alone, and a feeling that obscures your ability to move forward. And we don't have responses for the other questions yet, but the poll is still live. Feel free.
So, Julie, when you hear those responses around shame, I'm sure you've heard different variations of that. For a person that comes to a meeting like this, and they go, I don't know what to expect. Either they themselves are in recovery, or they have a family member that would like to explore recovery, but these are all the things that have kept them from walking through the door or logging online and wanting to see more about this. What do you say to them to encourage them to come back again? Or to encourage them to just move forward, as difficult as it might be, to approach a family member or try a different dance or a different pattern? How do you help encourage them when shame might be the biggest roadblock to taking the next step?
That they are loved and accepted, period.
That's it. That's perfect.
Period.
We have generations that go through this, and I love that you touched up on this. This is very helpful. You see families of one generation where alcohol is not an issue, and then there's the next generation where alcohol comes up, and then the generation that follows, there's a response, and alcohol is not an issue, but there are behaviors, there are things that we don't do, and then all of a sudden the next generation starts. So is there any advice, is there any tools that you give to those multi-generational patterns as you start exploring?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is I've talked about how, and maybe I haven't. I don't think I have. I had this, I shared about this in a pre-formal presentation conversation. I truly believe, and now this may sound so strange, that the gift of our family's experience and the gift of recovery has deeply impacted for the positive my family, my relationships with my kids and me and my grandkids, that we are more connected and our relationships are better than they would have been maybe if we hadn't gone through, a painful experience. That our relationships are more intimate and more connected. The thing that's been really interesting for me is to notice, and I'm not saying it's because of just my family system. My sister's family system has some experience with it, not with her or her kids, with her spouse. And as we've all begun to do work, I've seen my parents at 86 and 87, since these, years of our family being in recovery, that even that relationship has changed and become more meaningful and more really connected. And so it's fascinating because it does, initially I thought, it's going to start here and change, and it will, I hope. I hope that will continue. Yet it also moved upstream, which is great, because we just have my family of origin has been positively impacted by these experiences and what we have done since those experiences, the work we all continue to do. And it is continued work. I don't ever want to indicate that it is not. It is ongoing work, which I believe is life, is life. So, perfectly imperfect.
So we do have a question, but before I get into that, just a reminder that if you don't want us to be graced by your beautiful voice, you can always ask your questions. Just whip out your phone and I shall talk for you. But yes, go right ahead.
Hey, Julie, thanks so much for sharing everything tonight. I mean, you're such a wealth of information from your work to your family experience, but maybe you could share a little bit about the work you have done that I know you're passionate about with Clean Cause, and maybe it's taken a step further into kind of the accreditation or resources and the work you're doing with sober living. Maybe share a little bit about that with the group, because I think that's the next chapter that we need to talk about is, when a family goes from crisis to compassion and then really just trying to find a path forward on how to find the right resources?
I love you asked that question. I feel so blessed I'm in a second career with this. I spent most of my working career in the for-profit world and went back to school as a very non-traditional student, and have been blessed to spend the last little over a decade in this second career in nonprofit work focused on the field of substance use disorders and recovery. And I'm now in my current role with the Clean Cause Foundation, and it is the philanthropic arm of the Clean Beverage Company. Are any of you familiar with the yerba mate? Yes, okay, love that. Well, so we are the philanthropic arm of that brand, and the founder of the beverage company, Wes Hurt, from the very beginning, from when he founded the organization as a man in recovery, said, I want 50% of net profits to go as a give back into the field of recovery by way of supporting recovery housing. And he is the consummate visionary. And even in that piece of it, that philanthropic piece was, such a visionary, because at that time, because it is still now, the recovery housing market was a little bit like the Wild Wild West. There were no real accreditation standards, and well-meaning individuals would come in and start a recovery home without really understanding what that would be about, that had a personal experience. Or someone might get into it thinking it was a good business venture and not really understand everything that was necessary. So in 2021, Wes said, I think we need to really formalize the nonprofit side of this. And he asked me to come over and run and build and grow the philanthropic piece of it. For years, we gave recovery housing scholarships across the country. They were called Kickstarter scholarships. They were $500 scholarships to individuals in the first 30 days of leaving treatment or incarceration or behavioral health hospital or homelessness, and needing a place to live that was safe and supportive, appropriate to their recovery. And so the company's give back has been over $3.7 million and over 5,000 recovery housing scholarships across the nation. In 2024, we gave recovery housing scholarships in 47 states. Yeah, and with that, as the company grew, the give back and all that we were able to do grew as well. What has happened is that the need outpaced the funding, and it got to where we were receiving about 1,000 applications a month. Now, we had a system that we'd built that could scale to that and could take in the applications, and we had a scoring methodology and could handle it. With the funding, which was not an insignificant amount, by the way, the need was so great, the funding mechanism could only cover about 8.5%. So we turned away over 90%. And we still did a lot. Believe you me, we did a lot. And so with that, we began to, as we were looking at that, we began to consider and think about, does it make sense to move the support upstream a bit? We were at a very micro level. And would it make sense to bolster up recovery housing organizations so that they were more sustainable, more resilient, there were best practices in place, and there was a better system to support sustainability for the organization, which means better care for the individuals within that organization and the likelihood those individuals would stay in a home for a longer period of time and receive better care. And that's where we are now. It's a new program we're developing and we'll roll out. We're going to do a technical assistance grant with some direct funding to recovery homes across the country. And with that, the last 2 years, we've been engaged in a research project with the University of Texas Addiction Research Institute looking at the financial sustainability of recovery housing. And that was a Texas-based research program. But what we're doing with that, one of our deliverables are to basically impact policy, impact funding, raise the standard of care. And so one of our deliverables is a business toolkit. We've had an advisory board, a cross-campus advisory board, and then a cross-systems advisory board, and are building a business toolkit that will help support this work we're going to do with those houses. And so that's where we're engaged really, is the recovery housing system of care and the standards around that. And I get to present at a conference later this week on our findings. Our findings from the research project are just emerging, and we're going to present at a conference in Rhode Island around the collaborative perspectives on addiction. I don't know if is that what you were looking for? Okay. It's hard for me to talk about one tiny piece of it and not explain.
No, and this is why we have two separate microphones. It's like I just want to listen.
This is good.
I want to listen. I was like, this is exciting for us to hear, because at the Clean Cause Foundation, you're talking about a community that's supporting those in need across the nation. And what we're doing here in the CARES program, the major words you'll see on our website is community, education, and support. And we share those values with many partners out there, including the Clean Cause Foundation. And so you have spoken, you've given us education in terms of family dynamics, the invitation to change model that we're putting in here. You've talked about community. This is what we have here going on in the community and also online. And then support of where people can go to for help. I guess if I can just ask you one last quick question here. Well, one last quick question here in terms of support. How would you recommend people who are logging on and saying, okay, what's the next step? How do I get involved? How do I get engaged here with this program? What would you say to them?
Well, where's your email address?
Okay. So that's a good setup here.
Hey, Renee,
Texas.
before you finish, I got
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
So going back to the guilt and shame,
Yes.
that piece. This is the first time that Sherry's been able to attend this with me, and I'm sitting here thinking about what you're saying and what she said to me.
Okay.
And most of you know my story.
Yep.
We lost a daughter.
Yep.
Our ending was not good.
No.
And could you talk for just a second about what's in my head because of what you said? The faster you recognize the guilt and the shame, the quicker you get to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt and shame is not a bad thing.
Shame.
My family is broke. I got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
Recognizing it, and she pushed me to do that, and I wouldn't do it. And just touch on that for a minute about getting there quicker and recognizing it and doing something about it.
Yeah. So, Waylon, I love our conversations, right? And you and I both speak directly to each other. We're kind of direct communicators. I agree with you that guilt has a purpose and can be constructive. I respectfully disagree on the shame, because the shame is that place that you're just beating yourself up and you are internalizing and you see yourself as a bad person. So I want to just, because you're not a bad person. You're not. Your family went through the unimaginable. And you did everything you knew to do at the time with the information you had to help the person you love more than anything in the world. I'm not sure I can tell you how to get there faster, because I think it's different for each one of us and our experiences and our unique experiences. You knew what you knew at the time, and you did everything in your power to do what you thought was best for your child. And I wish that I had a very definitive answer to your question about how to get there quicker. And I don't. I don't. I'll tell you this. I think opportunities like tonight and this program offer that. If you know of someone that is scared and in the midst of it, invite them. You are taking action on supporting other people getting here quicker, potentially. It's not a real direct answer, I know. Do you have a follow-up thought or question?
Can I actually share what I have been inspired by hearing, not just from one person, but from multiple people that I've had the honor to speak with? When we think of shame and guilt, and I think you said this beautifully yourself a couple times, a common factor that comes into both of those, right? Because the internal and external are different impacts and different ways that they affect our lives. Yet they're both driven by fear. And a very wonderful person reminded me that the way to push past fear and overcome fear and become stronger because of fear is love. I don't know anything else that can do the things that we need to be as strong to overcome something like addiction as a family without love.
I think that's a
Thank you, Julia.
thank you. That is I think a perfect way to cap off this evening. And again, for those of you here in this experience, here in this room, you feel how strong and how personal this is. For those of you online, we hope you also have that experience of knowing that there is something very special that's being created here. There is a community and that you can be a part of that. And when we talk about resources and next step, do want to remind everyone that if you find yourself in the midst of an active crisis right now, 988 is a number that you can dial to be redirected to a crisis line immediately 24/7. So that's 988. Also encourage you to explore our website. That's texas-cares.org. So tx-cares.org. You'll find more information. You'll find a video of this speaker series, as well as all the other series that we've had or sessions we've had over the last couple of weeks. But we encourage you to be a part of the process. So if you're here in person, we encourage you, please invite people, bring people, bring that community, extend that community to the people around who may want to hear or have not known where do I go and have the same questions that we've been exploring here over the last couple of weeks and that Julie's been wonderful at helping us explore. And for those online, we do have social media presence. So on Instagram, on Facebook, you're going to see clips, you're going to see pictures. You're going to see quotes. And we just ask that you get the word out. You know, we keep talking about this being one of the best kept secrets that we have here in this community. And we're ready to push that out so that more people can hear about that and be part of this change. So thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. We will have another speaker next Monday. And Tiffany Anschutz, who is the executive director over at Sage Recovery with great experience, both personal and professional, will be sharing the stage next Monday. 6:30, 7 o'clock is when we kick off. And please do invite people and bring them over. And as we've been saying for the last couple of weeks, this is your first time here, welcome home. So, thanks for joining us.